Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Azure podcast with your host, Sam Foote.
And Alan Armstrong.
If you're new here, we're a pair of Azure and Office 365 focused IT security professionals. Each episode, we talk about a specific topic in the space. This week is episode 12 of season 2. We're going to talk around Purview Information Protection and how it can help you classify data in Office 365. Hey, Alan, how are you? Ready to chat around classifying data in Office 365?
Hey Sam, yeah, I'm not too bad. Yeah, I think this is a continuation of our sort of little mini purview journey that we're diving into. Hopefully, back out of it soon. but
Well,
yeah,
I think at the moment, the Purview team's on an all-encompassing journey of just pulling in different compliance aspects, right? And for anybody that didn't get like the private joke reference, Alan and I actively try to steer around compliance as much as we possibly can, but it's like a either a large um, planet or sun or black hole. It just keeps dragging us back towards its center, doesn't it, Alan? Right? We keep getting we get dragged into it far too often.
yeah. I mean, we know that the importance of it and things like that, but it's just another mindset for us to try and take on with our security and data, our
Yeah.
development heads.
I think for me, I do make I do make a joke about compliance, but only from our own viewpoints because I think there's just so many different technologies, and now we're going multi-cloud and we're even just Azure alone and Office 365, there's so many areas and you can't possibly niche down into every single area. So when we do get asked difficult questions from customers around compliance, it's definitely an area that we could do better on, if that makes sense. But as I mentioned, we try to um, steer towards our own niches, don't we, Alan? Not try to act like we know everything about everything, which we definitely don't.
Yeah, I mean that may be true, but with all my certs and stuff, it doesn't look like
Yeah,
that, does it? But hey,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, okay, let's have a chat around information protection. So, Alan, just to kick us off. Oh, and just to make it sort of clear, Alan is the and I'll use inverted quotes expert in this scenario. I'm going to be sort of fielding questions to him. I'm going to do my best to pull as much information as I possibly can out of his brain so that we can all learn a thing or two. So, Microsoft Purview Information Protection, Alan. What is it? Can you just give us sort of a high level overview?
yep, sure. So this is Microsoft's technology to help label, classify, and protect data within Office 365, and does reach out into other Microsoft products. Previously, it was called Microsoft Information Protection. And previous to that, it was called Azure Information Protection. So it's been out for quite some time now. It's a good sort of 4 or 5 years. It's evolved quite a lot. The move from Azure Information Protection to Microsoft Information Protection was a kind of big jump because they moved it in effect to be integrated more into Office 365 rather than being a standalone product. And then it's just I think at the moment it's just a rebrand to Purview Information Protection. So it just goes under that umbrella that we were talking about last week. But yes, so within you're able to classify documents within SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, or any document for that matter, potentially, um, as well as put a classification against that label um, based on your taxonomy. And you can also protect it in weird and mysterious ways, which we'll talk about later.
So, when we're talking about classification, could you just explain to us, what a um, you spoke about a taxonomy, but what can you just give us some examples of like a really sort of like basic taxonomy that a company might have? I assume it's like internal, external, confidential. Like, what are what's just to sort of give
Yeah.
a bit of an example of like how somebody might approach it.
Yeah, so this is outside of the technology itself. So this is a organization having a way or yeah, a way of identifying their different types of data and then be able to classify it against them. So the standard ones are kind of public, confidential, highly confidential, secret, top secret, that kind of stuff. You can go down to that sort of level. There may be some changes where you have a difference between internal and external on a classification. So confidential, but internal and confidential, external. Um, so it's just a way to help you classify your data so that you know the sensitive type, sensitive meaning to them, and being able to uh, identify the differences between them. So, a piece of data might go from maybe internal and then move to external because you're then allowed to share it with a partner or your customers and things like that. So you can ensure that your trade secrets or your internal information doesn't get leaked and exposed, which could cause damage to your financial damage to your organization, because it might be I don't know, could be anything. It could be a trade agreement, merger, acquisition, stuff that you don't want to get out yet, that's not public, that sort of stuff.
Okay, so that taxonomy, is that generally driven by the customer or end organization, typically?
Yeah, normally an organization has a idea of their sort of data classifications that they're using. Um, we have come across customers that don't. They kind of know they need one, but they're not at that. They're not there yet, sort of thing. So we can guide, as consultants, we can guide them to a either based on the information they've got and the area. So some of it might be based on departments, things like that as well. Because you might want to classify financial data different to HR data, maybe. There's different ways to cut the data
Okay.
around. It's just dependent on the customer. But yeah, it kind of they should. Most customers will know what their classification of data is, or they have a policy around it. Others may not, and we do have some sort of recommendations. Well, Microsoft come up with some recommendations anyway, but we can adapt on top of that from our experience.
Okay, great. So what types of file or data can you classify and label?
So with Microsoft Information Protection, it's all around Office documents mainly. That's where most of the integration is. So you can do emails, you can do Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., and they can be classified. You can also do other files, but you need the client to do that. Um, so it can so PDF files can be done that you can classify those, and if you're using Microsoft Edge as your PDF reader, then it will know the classification and whether you're allowed to open it if you've got encryption, etc. Um, and also, Adobe have a plugin that they've developed with Microsoft to allow it in there as well as creation of documents. So it's not just read to see whether you've got permission to access something; it's also to generate and classify. So if you're using Adobe, the full-fledged Adobe Acrobat, not let's say just the reader.
If I'm using, say, the free version of Acrobat Reader, can I use that plugin to then read, say, encrypted PDFs that have been classified?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
That is the whole point. Is they made it as tried to make it as frictionless as possible. It might be we're hoping, I say we, the royal we, we're hoping that the plugin would be sort of baked in, so it's like in there all the time because it's so that it improves uh, the 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 onboarding process. I guess most organizations either use the built-in stuff into Windows like the Adobe Microsoft Edge, or they have Adobe Reader there because it's got some more functionality around in general. Um, yeah, it's simple. It's an MSI that you push out, and it's really simple to get out there.
But I suppose I could have issues with, say, if I was I don't know, a Chrome organization. Don't know. Let's say I use Chrome and I use Chrome's inbuilt like PDF reader. Would I be able to read those, or would I have to, ensure that like I move over to like a Adobe reader?
That is a good point. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, based on I think that Microsoft have obviously baked in something to Edge because it is in effect Chromium in the background.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But I think they've added a little bit extra just to help with that. But I'll double check.
Yeah, no, it's just yeah. I think with all of these, this feels like because you're like classifying documents, they can be opened in many different ways, can't they? Right, and I suppose that could be an area of friction, couldn't it? Around what can read these documents and things like that when you're talking about encryption.
Yeah, I mean, you can open these documents in the browser from from Outlook Web and Office Outlook, or Office Web Office kind of stuff from from Office 365, as well as the mobile apps, Microsoft Office app and the and Outlook and things like that. So it's all baked into there kind of thing. So it makes it really from the Office or the Microsoft ecosystem, at least, it's really easy. Like I said, you can do other documents. It can be zip files and other files. It's just that they get a special extension on them because they in effect get encrypted, so they are protected. But it's not 100% there really with those sort of documents. But I don't think anything out there would be able to classify that sort of document data anyway. Really, not easily.
Yeah, I suppose they're going to go for what is most simple in their ecosystem to encrypt, right? Your words, Excel documents, your PowerPoints, I assume, are all
Yeah,
just first party native encryption ready to go, And I don't know, assumption time, the vast majority of organizations use the Office suite of products, don't they? Right. So there's a high amount of, install base out there to support it, right? For low friction.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I've decided that I want to start classifying, labeling my data. I might have some sort of viewpoint of I know what I want to classify. Not all organizations know what data they have, but yeah, okay, I'm happy path. I'm there. What do I need to do to start labeling?
So if you're using the latest versions of Office, then it is baked in natively, so you don't have to worry about deploying a client. There are some benefits of there is a client as well, and there is some benefit to deploy that on Windows. It does a few extra things that aren't in the baked in one yet, because the baked in one has to go through the Office update cycle. So there has to be a lot of testing outside of just the client itself for reverse protection. So it does take a little bit longer for some of those features to come in. Um, so you need the client or the thingy, the baked in stuff, and then in effect you go into the compliance portal, and then you can just start setting up your classifications. So initially you can set them up with just tagging data with metadata to say it's this type of document or this classification. Um, and then once that's in there, you can specify who can see which labels by groups. And then once those groups have been assigned to people or to users, then they will just see those next time they launch Outlook or Office. They will see those classifications turn up, and then they can use them. So it's relatively simple in some forms. There are advanced settings, things like that, to get more out of the whole product, and depending on your licensing. But to get started, to see it sort of working at least without any encryption, um, it's relatively simple.
Okay, that does sound very simple.
I I
Almost
think
too simple.
yeah, I think a lot of it is working out the classifications, the labels themselves, and how you want to structure them, because I've seen in the past with customers that um, they've wanted it to be really complex. And whilst the system lets you do that, Microsoft recommendation is sort of you should really only have 5 classifications at high level. And they recommend no more than 25, but you can have quite a lot. And there is a limit on the encrypted ones. I think it's like 150 or 200, something like that, which is crazy amount of labels. But Yeah, I think you've got to understand that if you want users to classify the data correctly, it needs to be simple enough to work or for them to understand. And that's where it kind of said about where you can set you with the groups, you can specify who can see certain labels. So there might be that the HR team can only see, can see the default ones across the organization, but only see the HR ones, maybe, so that you can reduce that complexity from a user perspective.
Okay, so you could effectively, um, because access to the labels is, say, group controlled, or however you're doing that. Um, you know, you may have 15 labels, but the average user might only see two or three. And then so I suppose you might get to a stage where some of your users might have a large number of them, dependent on their role and their where they are in the hierarchy of the business, I suppose. Um, so understanding that matrix of like who has got the worst amount of them, if that makes sense, right? Like I don't know. I assume you can't infer that from the system that easily, but I suppose that's so. So you're effectively saying that it's more the work really is on creating the taxonomy, getting the business aligned, and then teaching the users how to use it, because I assume like end users actually have to like go through the process of using this day in day out, right?
Yeah, that is a key point. That's why I haven't really mentioned encryption yet. That the first part is to metadata tag these documents at least from the start,
Okay.
so that
Yeah.
nothing's broken, nothing's encrypted, and the person you'll send it to can't open it. That you're not breaking business at the start. It's to
Okay.
get users used to labeling. We can also see from telemetry that the agents sort of send up to to the back end to see what documents are classified as and things like that, to see if users are actually doing it correctly. Well,
Okay.
seeing if
Yeah.
they're all just using the default one or if there is some change and things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Because a lot of the technology, like security, compliance technology that we put in, is not end user facing, is it? Right. It's like maybe transparent to them, or it's and things like that, whereas this is like front and center.
yes.
Like you've got to start classifying what you're creating on a daily basis, right? And there's probably a lot to, I'd assume, from off the back of that, there could be quite a lot of friction in terms of getting people adopted onto it, and making sure. So I suppose what the sort of thought I'm coming to is that management of the customer and the business is important to get them aligned on making the most simplistic taxonomy they possibly can, to encourage end users to actually use it in the most frictionless way, if that makes sense, right? Because you know you give an end user like 10 different classification options that they have no clue about how they work or what they do, and they're forced to do it. I suppose you could start to get some level of backlash then, if users backlash to their managers and their managers, and then it finally gets back to you. I could imagine that it can become quite um, an expectation and a management and a training problem, not necessarily a technology problem at that point, right? It seems like the technology is pretty much sorted. It's relatively simplistic.
Yeah, and there's different, I guess, parts of the journey customers are on, because if a organization has a taxonomy already of how they classify data, maybe not at the maybe splitting it by department kind of level, but at a high level, you've got highly confidential, confidential, secret, etc., or internal. They've got that idea of that at least, so that when they're working on documents, maybe they manually type internal, or whatever that classification might be. Maybe that process is there already, or at least they've been told to sign something to say, "I've read that we have classifications. I need to think about it." So
Yeah.
there's that scenario. So that's like a 50-60% on the way, and this is how
Yeah.
easy it is to then label it, because you already got that mindset. But you're right, if an organization's never done it and they're trying to approach it, there's the business change part.
Yeah, there's
Um,
there's 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 two, yeah, that business transformation part, which is the taxonomy and the classification, and then like you say, it is layering on the the technology to make it as simple as possible to use.
Yeah.
Okay. We've got started, and then I've realised as a business that I've got tons and tons and tons of documents. Um, I am a book publisher, and all I write is words all day, every day. So is this going to be a lot of work for me to take on? What do I do about, say, my back catalogue of documents that I've got and built over the course of the history of my business?
So there is in part of the it used to be P2, but it's not called P2 anymore. They've got rid of it, kind of thing. But in the more advanced licensing, I'll say for now, um, you're able to do automatic classification, and there's a couple of ways of doing that. It could be based on kind of what we touched on last week around sensitive information types. So these are um, different types of data that you can, in effect, classify on. So this could be a UK credit card, or a national insurance number in the UK, or debit card in the EU, kind of thing, or in the US it could be the medical number or your social security number, that sort of stuff. So Microsoft's got a baked in you list there for you, and it also includes things like Azure. I think it's Azure secrets and things like that. So they're starting to bring in some of that stuff to check. Um, so you got some of that, and you can create your own. So if you've got an invoice document that maybe you can say that it uses regex to work, to do some matching, but also you can do things like, well, when I see the word order within X characters, I should see this regex, so that you can, instead of it just being, if I see order, it means it's this type of classification. You can put some more context in there to reduce the false positives, kind of thing. So you can do that, and then within the label itself, you can specify that you can automatically classify, and you can attach, in effect, those classifications, those sensitive data types to that label. And you can say, if I see it X times, then it means it's this type, kind of thing. So there's a bit more context on it as well. So it's detecting it, and then you can say, how often do I detect it? And then it will automatically classify when a document is opened. So that's that part. So that is, you open up a backlog document. It will then sort of scan it for the for the sensitive information types, and then it will then automatically classify it for you. And then, because you got OneDrive set up, it auto save it with it there. That's okay. Microsoft, when information protection moved into the Microsoft Information Protection piece, into 365, they then have in effect, an online scanner. In effect, it's kind of basically what it is, and it can search basically SharePoint and OneDrive for documents with that classification. It will tell you whether it will classify it or not. So you can just have in effect a scanner there, just scanning SharePoint and OneDrive to look for these types of documents and then classify. So again, you can set the criteria to then classify those. The other part is that if you've got Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, that can integrate with the labeling, and based on the data it sees, when documents upload and download it, it can add a label to them, as well as going into things like Box and Dropbox. So it's moving out of Office 365 and actually potentially labeling documents in those areas, depending on API support in those areas to be able to do it. But that's the theory. But yeah, and then you can do on-premise documents as well. We were going to talk about it later, but we'll talk about it now. So you can download a Microsoft Information Protection Scanner, or Purview Information Protection Scanner, that sits on premise, and that can talk to file shares. And what that can do is it can scan them, and it will tell you what types of data you've got there. So you may have a file share that it's been there for 10, 15, 20 years, never been touched.
No,
Keep
Alan,
you
that never
you
happens. What are you
you
talking
keep move
about?
you keep moving the data from the new data storage to the next one, because someone needs to sort it out, but it's just there. And in effect, it can scan it, and it can tell you on that scan what type of data it has. So it will tell you that it's detected the data sensitive types, the information types. Um, if you have automatic labeling set up, you in audit when it's in audit mode, it will tell you what label it would apply to it. If you don't have automatic labeling, you can apply a default label across the board. So if you just say, I just want to apply this label to this, to this share, because it's in the finance team. It most likely will be confidential. If it's too classified too high, then users can declassify it when they get to it, kind of thing.
Because is that a strategy for organization to say just like label everything internal confidential, let's say, and then um users then have to like justify down as well as up, if that makes sense, and because I suppose it's declassification or reducing classifications is actually what they're trying to avoid, isn't it? Actively avoid. So you know
Yeah, well, we haven't really talked about the functionality there, have we? Actually, that when you apply a label and changing labels. So yes, so when you apply a label, you can apply uh, effects to the document or PowerPoint, etc. So you can put a header or footer in that's automatic based on that classification, and you can choose the color of it and things like that, and where it is on the page. Is it left aligned, right aligned, center, things like that. You can also put a watermark over it, so you can say, I've got a top secret one, and you want to put a watermark over. So if they try to take a screenshot or they take a picture of it, then it's got that watermark on it. But you're right. If you try to lower the classification, you can specify you require justification. Why are you lowering it? And whilst this is just a plain text box that they can just type whatever they want in it, that is audited in the back end, so that if for any reason that document gets leaked and it's not encrypted at this point, um, auditors can go in, or IT can go in and see why it was declassified. So there may be a legitimate reason why they declassified it, and then it was misused or something else later. So there may be things. So it's in the user's interest to put something in there meaningful. Whether that happens or not is yeah.
Hmm.
So
Okay, so going back to the automated scanning, because I assume because whenever I talk to customers around adopting any new technology, it's always friction that usually gets in the way, right? There's obviously commercial discussions that have to happen about how much it's going to cost them and things like that. But a big part of that is not just say like our cost; it's also their internal like resource cost. Because generally companies have like the minimal amount of internal IT staff as that they can possibly get away with, right? Because they're all they add more value than just calling them an overhead, but effectively, they're paying to de-risk you know, um, their their IT infrastructure in terms of security and operational, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that like let's say I've got 100,000 files or whatever, yeah, going through that manually could be like an insane amount of work, couldn't it? Right.
yeah,
So what you're saying is that we can scan and we can attempt to automatically classify. If that's not doing a great job, I'm not saying it won't, but sometimes it might just be that a customer's documents, they're just not very well like designed to be automatically scanned. Let's say they've got a bunch of PDFs that are just pictures or something like that. You know what I mean? Without
yeah,
some weird use case like that, like they scan their invoices in and then they're just images, JPEGs, instead of OCR like text, right? Just using stupid examples. So you can also say to them, right, okay, well, um, what we could just do is we could just apply internal confidential to everything to start off with, and allow people to then justify, send your humans in to do that classification when they next open the documents or something like that, if that makes sense. So you can take a staged approach to that rollout, because I suppose that would be the quickest thing, wouldn't it be? Like just apply a label to everything automatically, and then as you go through, like all of the old archive stuff that you probably won't touch is all just automatically labeled and encrypted. And then going forward, if you open any other previous things, you've just got to go and relabel. I suppose if you want to share outside of the organization, is the only time that you would relabel from that perspective, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it from both sides. That I've had an organization say that they don't want to document their previous stuff because it is so much. There's so much information there, and that they said it's only on reuse. So when an old document is opened, then it gets classified, and that I'm
Right, I
assuming
see.
that is
Okay.
based on them assuming that everything is that, like you said, that level without actually applying a label to it. I don't think
Okay,
they
right.
wanted to
Yeah.
change it, kind of thing. But then I've had the other way, like you said, they want to classify everything to get it to a level where they can say we know what's here.
Well, because then at least I suppose if you classify it to an encrypted internal state, you can at least be more confident that anything that then does leak outside of the estate is encrypted and it's labeled already as internal, right? The worst thing that you're going to do is slow somebody's like work down during a day where they've got to reclassify it, say for external consumption, and provide a justification for it, which probably wouldn't actually somebody that knows how to do it. It wouldn't actually slow them down too much. Well, not unless they had to do it hundreds of times. But then that would also ask the question of is why is somebody sharing hundreds of documents externally, right? Is it part of their actual job role to do that, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
So
yeah,
there's that, and with the scanning perspective, we always do like an audit scan first to see what's out there, because there is that whole, we always talk about, you don't know what's out there until till you've done a scan or something. So um, and just from the context of the actual, like, the scanning server, it basically backs onto a SQL database that can be run locally on that server itself. It doesn't have to be like a cluster or anything. um, but you can join up multiple servers to do it faster, because I've had customers where they've had like petabytes of data, and they're like, how long is it going to take to scan? And you're like, yeah, it might be here in 4 years' time, if you had one scanner. But Microsoft brought in a thing, in effect, that, based on the size, and then you can like scale out to multiple VMs in effect. They talk to the same database, so they like populate the same database, but they can basically scan a lot quicker. But obviously, you got to then determine how much you're hitting that file share, and how much your customers, your users are using it, because you want to just take it out for
yeah.
scanning, sort of thing. So there's
You
a
you might say that you want to just scan at night or something like that, right? And just can you do that? Can you just schedule it for certain times of day and things like that, or is it just slowly?
I
Is
think
it
it
is it
just
just it's just scanning so slowly that it shouldn't have any sort of impact?
Yeah, I think it depends on how much process power and things like that you give it, and how many servers, things like that, how quick you want to scan it.
Okay,
Um, and again, even within a file share, you can specify different folders within that, so you don't have to like do the whole server. You could be like, like I said, you'll hit the finance team on Monday, and on Tuesday you'll do HR, kind of thing. So you don't have to do a big scan in one hit, sort of thing.
okay, cool, great. And I suppose you've talked about encryption, because this is quite a big element of information protection
Mm.
is encryption. So can you just explain what encryption is used for and sort of what the experience is like with doing encryption on these documents?
Yes, so it's all based on Azure rights management. So anyone out there that used to use like Active Directory rights management to do encryption, it's very similar to that, but it's the cloud version. It's been there for years, so it's not changed too much from that. But in essence, on a label, you can specify to encrypt it, and you can specify who has access to it from with that using that encryption. Um, and it is very granular. And I say that because, in effect, you can say, um, we'll go down the HR team, because I think it's a good example. So you've got your HR team, right? And they're putting that they want to encrypt their HR data, user information. Um, so what you can do is you can say that the HR team, they're in a group, are allowed to open and edit these documents whenever they want. Not necessarily wherever they are, but they can do it. They can do whatever they need to with that document. They can change the classification, things like that. And then maybe you've got some juniors, junior HR staff there. So with those users, you might say, well, you can open them, you can edit them, but you can't change classification, so they can't accidentally leak it. So you might have HR internal, and they can't accidentally classify it as or external and then like leak it out, kind of thing, based on DLP that's in place. So that's quite cool. You can do that. And then you might have the employees, where actually they're only allowed to read it. They're not allowed to change it. If they want to make a change, they have to go to HR to make the change, kind of thing. But what you can do with that, so that's just like read, modify, and like owner kind of state. But you've also got, you're not allowed to print screen it. You're not allowed to print it. When you're in a Microsoft Teams meeting and you share this document that is internal only, and you don't have permission to share it, like screen share it, it goes black. I don't think you've ever seen that, Sam. But
No, I
I've been
haven't.
on a
No.
call and you're sharing something within internal team. They're like, oh, we can't see anything. It's black. You're like, oh, minimize it, and then they can see your screen again. And you're like, oh, yeah, I can't share this. I can't declassify it to show you. So yes, you can even do that. So even if you are on a Teams meeting, you accidentally bring up a document that you're not allowed to screen share or to capture or print or save as, that kind of thing, then you can't, which I think is really powerful. The other thing, so we've talked about the different sort of levels you can do, and there is loads of different sort of layers you can do on that. So it's worth sort of looking at what you can do. There's different combination. That kind of goes where it might get a little bit complicated with the labels as well, where you're trying to work out who has access, because they're based on groups. So you can add someone to a group, and then they got permission to view it, and then you can take them out, and then they can not see it. So there may be sort of that sort of, I'm working with this partner, I'm going to show them this sort of project document, share it with them. Okay, cool. They're finished. Right, now remove their access. Bang, no access, and they may have the documents. And that's what I'm going to go on to next. This encryption is on the file itself. It's not where it's stored. It's nothing to do with Office 365. So if that document does get leaked, so say you got an internal one, you say only internal people can open it. Say someone does leak it, maybe they can get it through DLP. They send it to their Gmail account, whatever. If someone tries to open it, they have to authenticate to your Azure AD tenant. When they do that, or if they don't do that, they can't open it. It's a dead file to them. But if they do open it and put credentials in, it will then tell you, it will then say, no, you're not allowed to have access to this, and stop them. And also within the audit logs, it does say this person tried to open this file and they were blocked. So you can see when it's been leaked to China, Russia, etc., when they've tried to open it. And now it doesn't stop someone sharing their credentials, but that's a different story at that point. But
Yeah.
so
Okay, right. So when we're talking about encryption, we're talking about encrypting the file, but we've also got a level of like user rights to that file as well. Screenshotting, printing, sharing on Teams, X, Y, and Z. And then the label is then really controlling people's access to those documents. Like you say, it's on the document itself. So let's say somebody was part of, say, a finance team, and they copied a file to their desktop from like the finance share or whatever it is. Then they get removed from the finance team, so their access to the share is gone, but also that file is then dead to them, right? Because it's been classified with a finance label. So you've also got some like roaming access control, if that makes
yes,
sense, on your files. I don't know the best way to describe that, but that seems really powerful. And then, like you say, a big part of it is also outside of the organization, right? Files being shared with, like, say, trusted third parties, and then them leaking information outside. So, just allowing those people access to those files is very, and being able to revoke access, I suppose, right? Because the challenge is done at the time that they authenticate with your back to your tenant, right? So if in 6 months you remove them from your tenant, or you remove their access, then all those files are just completely, you know inaccessible to them, right? So that's really
Yeah,
powerful, really,
yeah,
really
and
powerful.
with some of the labels themselves, you can specify how long a document has for offline access. So it might be that you say, well, someone can use it for 5 days offline before they have to like confirm that it's still got access, so that you don't
Right, okay,
completely
yeah,
break somebody that works offline. Maybe it's two
okay.
days.
So you could add a little bit of flexibility. You could
Yeah,
say, right, they have to check in every 7 days or something like that to make sure that, if they're on a train going to a meeting or something, they can, if they've authed within the last 7 days, they can still get access to it offline, things like that. Yeah,
yeah,
okay, that's really good. Yeah, okay. So let's move on to licensing. And I think this is going to be the last area I think we should go through, because this can be a little bit complicated, I think, if I remember rightly. So, yeah, can you take us through licensing, Alan? How much it costs?
yeah. So I kind of said that it was in two stages. So it used to be like it used to be called Azure Information Protection Plan 1 and Plan 2. They've still got sort of Azure Information Protection as a base, and then there's some extra features that are sort of split around different bundles and things like that. So the Plan 1 is part of the Enterprise Mobility and Security E3, EMS E3, the M365 E3, and Microsoft 365 Business Premium. So to start classifying and like manual classification and encryption is including those levels. So quite a lot of the organizations we've worked with are at that level, because it's been like 3 or 4 years they've got to like the E3 sort of tier now with all the
Well, if it
benefits.
includes business premium, that's business three premium to up to E3, right?
Hmm.
A lot of businesses are on those SKUs, aren't they? Right? Because even if you've got, like budget conscious organizations, and they're like, because I think we get surprised sometimes about business premium, don't we?
Yeah,
Because it's like this little, it's a dark horse, isn't it? Right? It's got so much in it. It's got so much value, and I think it's only like £16 British a month, something like that. It's crazy the amount of value that you get from it. Anyway, sorry, Alan.
no,
I got a bit
it's just
distracted there with my
it's
love
just
of business
yeah,
premium.
it's just a shame
Yeah,
it's got the cap at 300 users or whatever it is. So, but
yeah,
but that's the
exactly.
reason
Yeah,
why it's that
yeah,
level sort of thing, to get
yeah. It
help.
is. Yeah.
But yeah, so they kind of give you the base tools to start doing that classification manually, and well, in fact most organizations that might be just enough to do it manually. You can use the MIP scanner, but you can only, like I said, you can only do an audit scan in effect, and I think you can only do a classify by this label. You specify one. You can't do it like dynamically based on the content, this kind of thing. So you
Okay.
can do I want the default label to be this.
So I could set like loads of departmental default labels. So I could say, right, hit this folder with all the finance default label, hit this one with the HR default label, and then it's manual classification from there on in. Yeah.
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Okay.
So that's that part. So that's really useful because it's practically in most organizations like toolkit. And then you've kind of got the P2 stuff, and there's a couple of different areas. So there is like the MIP scanner and client doing rule based labeling, and that is part of EONS E5. Um, you've also got automatic classification. That automatic classification I said in 365. That's a different license. That comes under information protection and governance SKU, which I never heard of until I looked it up earlier, because they've obviously changed it again since I last seen it. Um, so you've got that. You've got Office 365 E5, which gives you that top part about Office 365 automatic classification, things like that. And then you've got M365 E5 compliance, which gives you the same above the Office 365 stuff, but plus all the other compliance tools. So it's got the information protection governance included in that, so you can break it down again if you needed to, or grab all the compliance tools.
Okay. Yeah.
But if you want everything together, then you've got the Microsoft 365 E5, which is all the tools you can ever want at the moment.
and probably more in the future.
and probably
Well,
more in the
new
future. Yeah.
SKU in the future.
um,
Yeah.
you've got the combination of M365 E3 plus the M365 E5 compliance SKU. So it's just combining the two, so you get everything. And then you've got the M365 E3 with the M365 E5 information protection governance, which is then gives you everything as well. So that's the lowest. That's the the closest to getting everything at the without having all the extra bits you may or may not need if you're just doing information
Yeah,
protection.
if you just want specifically information protection, you've got to go E3 as your base, and then you can do that uplift to E5 information protection and governance just to get yeah, information protection.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay.
So
Yep.
and then yeah, as I said them in the order of the everything, all the compliance tools, and then just the sort of information
Yeah.
protection governance kind of thing. So
Okay.
pricing I've not looked at because it changes, and yeah, I've not kept up with it.
So there's a few different ways, and there's effectively this P1 and P2 leveling as well, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
the more simplistic um, manual approach to it, which does give you a lot of value, doesn't
yeah,
it? It's just some of that. If you're a larger organization trying to onboard, you've got then a cost versus time exercise that you've got to think about in terms of your ROI, haven't you? In terms of like getting it onboarded and things like that. So
yeah. I mean, one thing I didn't mention, it's more around the sensitive information types, is that you can use a trainable classifier, which you can in effect throw at documents, and it's machine learning, and it will tell you these types are all true ones. So you get it to learn, and then you can use that to then classify documents as well. But
okay.
that is
So
in.
if I've got my standard invoice document
Mhm,
that I produce, I could throw some number of those invoices at that trainable classifier. It can quotes machine learn or learn the
mhm.
black box, and it can learn what those are, and then you can add that as a classifier from training it from example, like with that learning. That's
Yeah.
a cool that's a cool
Yeah,
thing.
I've not
Yeah.
fully used it yet 'cause I've just started time, but and plus I don't have like 200 documents. I think you have to be able to train
Yeah.
it. I don't have
Okay.
that sort of
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
data, not to
Okay.
make it true.
But the point you're trying to make is there are ways to try and if you do have a large document library, there are ways to try and hunt out as much of this stuff automatically as you
Yeah,
possibly can. Right? Yeah. Okay. That's amazing.
and it's probably worth just saying that because we've talked about it kind of not yesterday, but last episode is that the sensitive labels are used in other products as well, so you can use them within DLP. I talked about it for Defender for Cloud apps, and we talked about it in the Purview um, governance portal and stuff, where in effect you can specify it in one location, and then it's like you can use it in multiple locations. Then,
Okay. Great. Yeah. Amazing. So let's do a little bit of reflection. Let me try and mirror back to you what I think you've told me because you've been all over the product, if that makes sense. So I'll try my best. So what I originally the a point that I sort of got originally from it is that defining that taxonomy is really a business led activity, um, and that can have some inherent um, time and resource needed to get full alignment with a customer or an end client. Um, we can label Office documents, and that's got really good first party integrations with the native Office clients. You also mentioned that was a secondary client that you can send down as well to get newer updates to that. And then, so around the whole Microsoft ecosystem, you should expect to see like really good, first party integration. And you also mentioned that there is also third party, but first party integrations in terms of like Adobe Reader to get, your standard, as many of your like third party tools understanding these documents that you're now going to create,
yeah,
right?
one of them, another one is AutoCAD, which is quite bizarre. CAD drawings.
Okay. Well, that would make sense in terms of their intellectual property value, right? For sure, definitely. Um, and then there's a level of encryption as well. So we're not just classifying, marking these documents. We can encrypt them, and there are ways to prevent certain types of access to these files. So being able to watermark them, preventing screen sharing with Teams or screenshots, printing, X, Y, and Z, all of those different things. There's also a way to scan and label on-premise files. So even though this is a sort of cloud-driven service, they're not they're not also forgetting our on-premise friends and the amount of data that they could or could not be hoarding on-premise, which is good. And there's a few various different ways to license the product, right? It's probably not the simplest thing to license, for sure. But the only good thing apart about that is there are multiple different options to license it, right? We're talking about even being included even as far down as business premium, which is a very okay, it's only like the P1 aspect of it, so it's not the full beans experience, but that is still important that it gets it into as many customers, as possible, as many clients as possible. And I think that's pretty much it. Anything else that you want to add, Alan, or anything that I've missed, or that you think is worth everybody
I
understanding?
I think I've probably missed a few bits because it's enlarged. It's got so much more than when I previously seen it, kind of thing. I try to keep up with it, but I'm trying to keep up with all the other security products more than the sort of compliance and information sort of protection side of things. So there's probably something I've missed. So apologies for that. But I think I've caught the key sort of areas and the benefits from it. I think.
Yeah, I think we're here to call out the key features
Yeah.
and what it can do, how it can help you, if that makes sense. So specific nuances or quirks or certain features aren't important for this discussion. That's for sure. So, but thank you very much, Helen. That was a really good overview of information protection.
And
Um, yeah, no, thank you. And next episode, we are going to be talking around architecting serverless applications. So, whether you are a function app developer, a citizen developer, a logic app citizen developer, a flow citizen, whatever you call yourself, if you are serverless, you'll want to listen to the next podcast. Um, we recently had a very good conversation with a customer around how to architect serverless applications for the different types of developers that you have inside of your organization. And we thought it would be a good topic for us to cover because um, I think a lot of people are sometimes put off with some of the tooling there and they don't realize how interoperable those systems actually are. Being able to have some people build in flows, some people build in logic apps, and other people build in function apps, dependent on the resource that you've got available to you, and architecting those solutions. So, yeah, we're going to have hopefully a fun deep dive into that because serverless applications, I think, is a quite a bit, and automations are a big passion of Alan and I's current focus. We do a lot in automation, so it should be quite a fun one. Hey, Alan.
Yeah, I think between me and you, we've always had a Logic app is better than Function app kind of thing. But then recently, we've done a job where we've used three different technologies to build the same solution. It's been in harmony, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think there are some real key, like really good insights that we can explain to people there throughout that conversation because that conversation where you're saying, what technology should we use depending on what resource we've got, can be complex, right? You might have development resource where you can't build everything in function apps because you don't have enough time to them. So let people, collaborate in the space that they know, and they can work in. Anyway, we won't talk too much about it. We'll have a good chat about it next time. So yeah, if you've enjoyed the episode, please do consider subscribing if you'd like to listen to more of this sort of content in the future. We have many more topics that we'd like to cover, and your listens and support is what will continue to fuel the podcast going forward.
Yep. And if you have any feedback against this episode, against other episodes in our back catalog, um, we've got the ability for you to give us that feedback. So within the show notes, there should be a link, and if you click on that and give us some feedback. We'd appreciate to hear from you guys and girls, um, because yeah, it helps us. In effect, what Sam said, it helps us guide what we do next as well, and whether we're actually doing the right things, because we kind of see it from the numbers that we're doing well, but you know we don't know unless we hear from you
Exactly.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So if there's anything we do to annoy you or you want us to change, then please do let us know. We can take critical feedback. Honest. Cool. But thanks very much for this episode, Alan. Some great insights, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yep. Thanks for listening, everyone, and speak to you soon.